Halloween is just around the corner, tiktakers. The scariest night of the year, and surely one of your favorites. And did you know, in other parts of the world, Halloween is also referred to as the Night of the Witches, in honor to those terrifying creatures who have been a threat to humankind since the beginning of time. Today, we'll share with you more information about their history and the nature of their powers. The first signs of witchcraft appeared in classical civilizations and almost always practiced by women. They would gather at night and had the power of transforming into flying animals as well as producing diseases and storms. The most famous witches in classical Greece were Medea and Circe, who were especially skilled in making magic potions. They used to be associated with particular places, such as swamps and graveyards, which were considered portals to the underworld. Some witches would take advantage of their connection with the dead to predict the future, such as Ericto in ancient Rome. There was also the witch of Endor, who, according to the Bible, turned to King Saul to speak with the dead prophet Samuel. Witches would gather at covens for Sabbaths, parties celebrated at midnight where they would drink and dance in honor of the horned god of fertility and nature. To carry them out, they would choose remote places where they could practice magical rituals that would grant them even more powers. Those gatherings also served to convert new adepts, boys and girls who were kidnapped from their own homes and consecrated to that god. They would start as disciples of the other witches, serving them until becoming witches themselves. Meanwhile, other children would suffer a much worse fate, becoming food in cannibal banquets or becoming ingredients for potions and magical ointments. To reach those remote covens, the witches would travel at extremely high speeds as if they were blasts of wind, riding either a beast or a magical broom. Some witches even had the power of teleporting, as well as the power of transforming into their favorite animal: a crow, frog, rat, hare, or cat. Now, witches didn't exist just in North America, but also in Latin America. Legends talk about witches that could transform into birds, more specifically, a mythical bird known as a chonchon, which looked like a human head with wings and claws. Other witches would wear a macoon vest, a vest made with the chest skin of a dead maiden, which would grant them the ability to fly. However, the horrifying practices of the witches were as terrible as the brutal persecutions they suffered during the Middle Ages. It all started in the 13th century when the church started to associate them to the cult of the devil and created inquisition courts to persecute them and punish them. Many accusations were made just for political reasons or just out of envy. Many times it was simply healers using natural remedies, and many innocents were persecuted. To identify the witches and make them confess, the suspects would be subject to different kinds of torture. They would be interrogated for hours, they would be confounded with false promises of salvation, and they would also be stuffed with needles to see if they bled or showed pain. There was also the belief that true witches could float on water, so the suspects would have their feet and hands tied and would then be thrown to a lake. If they raised to the surface, the accusation would be demonstrated. However, if the suspect instead drowned at the bottom of the lake, then her innocent soul would be saved. And the ones declared as guilty of being witches would be sentenced to be burned alive at the stake. The bloodiest time for witches started in the 15th century, when it was allowed for the civilian court to carry out those trials. In all of Europe, it is calculated that between 50,000 and 100,000 people were sentenced to death during those trials, about 80% of them being women. The last victims date from the end of the 18th century and the beginning of the 19th century, when numerous protests finally stopped those cruel trials. Many witches went down in history with their proper names. Alice Cateller, the first one with proper historical records, dates back from the 14th century. She was a beautiful Irish woman, capable of manipulating men so they would fulfill all of her whims. We also have Mother Shipton, a powerful clairvoyant from the 16th century who had the stereotypical appearance we normally associate with witches. Hunched body, bulging eyes, and a long hooked nose. In 1621, Elizabeth Sawyer was accused of bewitching the children and livestock of her neighbors because they refused to buy her brooms. She ended up confessing to being a witch and having touched the devil who would come to her in the form of a dog. She was executed. In 1785, Ellie Kedward was accused of deceiving many children in the town in order to steal their blood. Centuries later, her story would inspire the 1999 movie The Blair Witch Project. Nowadays, our understanding about witchcraft and pagan rituals has changed drastically. In fact, there are now publicly recognized religions such as Wicca, which is based in the practices of ancient witches, as well as the tenets of other ancient religions. To become part of the Wicca religion, it's necessary to undergo formal education and training, go through different grades, and be initiated by an established Wicca member or priest. However, in other places of the world, such as certain regions in Africa, witchcraft is still being practiced in the most horrifying ways possible, with rituals that involve mutilation or even the sacrifice of innocent victims, according to the UN's Children Protection Agency. So, now you know, TikTakers. Be careful about what you do this Halloween. Leave the spells and potions to the professionals if you don't want to become the target of an angry evil witch. Or don't worry, since witches don't actually exist. Right? If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it. And if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!